Hi, everyone. Welcome.
Hello,
Um,
how are you, Pragya?
Good, how are you?
Good.
I'm trying to see if I um, make sure I can see everybody here. Okay. And I'll just talk to two people here.
All good.
We'll let everybody join and settle, and then we'll get started in a couple of minutes. Hi, Jeff. How are you? I see so many familiar people.
Hey, Brian, it's Rob.
How are you?
Good. How you doing?
Good. Okay. All
Looks like
right.
you
I
got
think we can
good.
get started. What do you think, Corey?
Sounds good. Take it away.
All right. I'll let you admit people and I'll just start the seminar. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Pragya Murphy, Director of Development and Impact Investing here at the Central New York Community Foundation. On behalf of the Community Foundation, I'd like to welcome you all for our annual professional continuing education seminar that we've been hosting over 25 years. Would love to know, actually, we should do a poll next year, perhaps, how many repeat customers or audience we've had, and give a prize or something. But anyways, as you all know, we host this seminar in conjunction with the State Planning Council of Central New York, and this is in lieu of their October meeting. And this year's seminar topic is Family Wealth, a hard look at the soft issues. Before we introduce our speaker, I'd like to go over the CE instructions for those who are seeking 2 hours of CE credits. And if we could just go to the next slide, just so people have the CE slides, that would be great. For insurance, CE, CFP, and CPE credits, you must complete and submit the CE and evaluation forms in order to receive credit. Corey, if you could put that link to the CE form right now in the chat, that would be great. And this was also sent out in the emails you received yesterday and this morning. If you need more than one type of credit, insurance, CE, and or CPE, you only need to complete the one form, just indicate what, on that form, what type of CE credits you need. And then also mandatory verification codes must be included in the CE form to verify your presence for the entire 2 hours of the seminar. We'll run the Zoom attendance report to verify your presence for the 2 hours, and we'll be randomly posting the 8 attendance codes via Zoom poll throughout the presentation. So please pay attention and jot them down directly onto the CE form electronically. You don't need to click on the poll or answer it, just need to jot down the codes. For CFP, there is no code needed. The Zoom attendance report would verify the attendance. Life and health insurance CE credits is provided by POHS Institute, and please submit the forms with the 4 mandatory attendance codes. And to receive your 2 CPE credit hours, you must include 6 attendance codes on the form. So we can go to the next slide to thank our sponsors, because without our sponsors, we'd not be able to offer this educational seminar and get our renowned speakers like Susan today to you all. First, our presenting sponsor is Bon Shenikin King. And just so you're aware, we did host our the professional advisor social networking event in May this past summer, and this is that was also sponsored in combination with the CE seminar as well. And then our gold sponsors are Crucial Partners, Estate Planning Council of Central New York, NBT Financial Group, the Bonadio Group, and Hancock Esterbrook. Thank you so much. They've been supporting this seminar for many, many, many years. So thank you so much. And next we have our CE sponsors. We have so many of these, and a lot of them this year from our Professional Advisor Council members, and their firms have stepped up and supporting our events, including the seminar. So thank you to all. And at this time, I will pass the mic over to our President and CEO, Melanie Littlejohn.
Good, thank you. And thanks, Pragya, for all of your work and your commitment to donors, and certainly even working with all of our advisors. A huge thank you. And I also see some of the development team on this morning, Jan Lane, and certainly a huge thank you also to Corey, Shad, and our communications team, who do so much work in the background to work with all of you. And a big thank you for 25 years. 25 plus years, we have been working hand in glove with you, our partners, to really help lean into how do we give life to the work that donors' contributions enable to really help strengthen the fabric of our regions, strengthen the fabric of what happens with the nonprofit organizations that donors give to day in and day out, really to make us a beautiful and strong community and region. So this is particularly exciting for me to introduce Susan Schoenfeld to you this morning. Her talk really will help anchor all of us, including anchor the work that you do every single day with your clients. It's probably and arguably the hardest part of your jobs, is really leaning into family wealth, but not only on the technical side, which we that you do so wonderfully, but it is really the soft stuff that really helps frame out family wealth, and looking at those soft issues that help really define how your clients bring their own philanthropic ambitions to life. So it is certainly a huge pleasure for me to introduce our guest speaker this morning. Susan has both a CPA, MBA, and is the CEO and founder of Wealth Legacy Advisors. She is award-winning thought leader to families of wealth and a public speaker to financial services industries and those people who serve them, or as she says, or wants to, on the human issues that keep families of wealth up at night. Legacy, next generation, stewardship, governance, leadership, succession, and philanthropy. She's based in New York City, and she is a recovering attorney and CPA, and one of few women on the national speaking circuit who is guiding financial services firms and their clients to connect with the human side of client relationship. Family Wealth Reports Awards 2020, Susan's passion is helping families and their provider organization with the tools to take them to their full potential. It is certainly my pleasure and privilege to introduce our speaker today, Miss Susan Schoenfeld. Susan,
Thank you.
welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, Pragya and Corey and the terrific team at the Central New York Community Foundation for inviting me. I'm sure during this talk you're going to have some questions. Feel free to type them into the chat at any time, and we will save time at the end to address your questions. But let's start with some audience participation and go right ahead and type your answers in the chat. What would you say that most financial services firms lead with when they go into prospect meetings or client meetings? Let's see what you say in the chat. Or what do you lead with when you go into prospect meetings or client meetings? Financial planning. Good. What else? Anything on the client's mind? Perfect. Understanding client's expectations. Excellent. Questions, open-ended. Excellent. I love that. Anybody else? Okay. I will tell you that most people do focus first on financial planning. They do focus first on investment performance in those meetings. And you would think that financial services firms are leading with their investment results because they think that's what most clients want to hear. That's what they're most interested in. But the truth is that good investment performance is assumed. So that's not a differentiator. If you're an investment advisor, if you're a lawyer, they assume that you're smart and that you're on top of all the grats and slats and Cuperts and alphabet soup that's out there. And they assume if you're a CPA that you know all about taxes, the income taxes, the estate taxes, the gift taxes, that you're on top of all that. If you're a trust officer, they assume that you know all that. So if you lead with how smart you are, that's not a differentiator because every single firm that they visit is going to say the same thing. And if that's all you have, as soon as the other guy down the block has a better year than you do, what do you think your client's going to do? That's right, he'll leave. In today's turbulent world of ruthless competition in the financial services industry, business can be won or lost on subtle differentiators. The stakes have never been higher. Yet too often, firms approach prospect and client meetings as nothing more than performance or product reviews, and they lead with their pitch books. And you're squandering a critical chance to focus instead on what the client is most interested in, what keeps the clients up at night, and risk losing that business opportunity to the competition. As a recovering trust and estates lawyer, as Melanie said, and former fiduciary counsel at Bessemer, a national white shoe trust company, catering to the ultra high net worth market, then a family ambassador at a $600 million single family office, and now for the last almost 13 years as a consultant and thought partner to ultra high net worth families and their advisors. I have done nothing but eat, sleep, and live the ultra high net worth market my entire career. And I think I have the secret sauce to help you beat the competition and to win and keep more business opportunities. So what's the secret? What keeps your clients up at night? Let me ask you another question. Now, this one is a multiple choice, and I think we're going to do it as a poll. So there you go. You can vote more than once. There is no wrong answer here. I know we told you not to click on the polls, but that's for the continuing education. This is the one exception where you actually can click on a poll. So there's 1, 2, 3, and 4. As I said, there's no wrong answer here. You can even click more than once. And here we go. Oh, we're still going. Great.
Susan, are you able to see the result?
I am. Thank
Okay,
you.
perfect.
This is fascinating. I love this. I've never done it as a poll before. Usually I just do it as a show of hands, but this is great. Okay, I'm going to give you 10 more seconds if you haven't voted yet. Okay, so we're going to end the poll. The results are teaching them financial literacy is number 1. We have a tie for number 2, preparing for family business succession and raising productive members of society. And then finally, last is protecting them from financial predators. But when I tell you that financial predators also includes potential ex-spouses of their kids, usually that number goes up. But what surprises me is usually the the answer is number 4. I've asked this question hundreds of times all over the country, and the most frequent answer to this question is generally number 4, raising productive members of society. And why do you think that the majority of people that I do ask, and so this is actually very interesting to me. Why do you think that many people are concerned about raising productive members of society? Well, I'm going to start with a little story. Oh, Corey, I can't advance my slide. Maybe I have to close the poll.
Yeah, try that.
Sorry, folks. This is not working. Nope, not advancing. There we go. Okay, here we go. So, about 20 years ago, I was invited into a new business meeting with a lovely couple. Let's call them Mary and George. Doesn't really matter. They lived in a small town, the kind of town where everybody knows everybody. And George had developed a product, let's say it's a widget, in his garage. And he had just sold it to a ginormous company and had a huge liquidity event, $100 million. Classic American dream, right? All the while that George was building his business, what was Mary doing? Yep, she was raising the kids, running the house, paying the bills, hiring and firing service providers, doing the investing, everything necessary to free up George to work on his business. So Mary and George from small town USA are ushered into this beautiful, ornate, wood-paneled conference room at my former wealth management firm for the pitch meeting. The new business guy who organized the meeting invited someone from every department to come in and make a pitch about all the firm could do for them. And I'm sure you've seen this movie before. The investment guy was there, the tax guy was there, the relationship management guy, and me. And I'm sitting there watching as the investment guy tells George all about the firm's investment performance, watching the tax guy tell George all about the latest tax strategies, and watching the new business guy tell George and the relationship management guy take George page by page through the pitch book. What's wrong with this picture? That's exactly right. Nobody was talking to Mary. I sat there watching Mary look around the room, completely unengaged, checking her phone, counting ceiling tiles. Nobody was talking to her. And I was the only other woman in the room, and my turn hadn't come yet to talk. So I leaned across the table to Mary and said to her, "So, what keeps you up at night?" Because I knew that she had been doing all the investing and managing the service providers and managing all the bills and everything that freed George up to create his widget. But what she said surprised me and changed my whole viewpoint on how to approach clients and prospects. She said, I'm interested in all those things they're talking to my husband about, the investments and the taxes and all that. But that's not what keeps me up at night. What really keeps me up at night is my children. I have 2 teenage sons. We live in a small town, and everybody knows we just hit the jackpot. And my 2 teenage sons are suddenly the most popular kids in school. And I'm new to this wealth too, and I could use some help on how to educate them on handling their newfound popularity. And I'm scared to death that they're going to lose the incentive to make something of themselves one day, separate from the family money. And I kept asking her more and more questions and probing and engaging her. And you know what happened in the car ride on the way home? Mary told George that we were the right firm for them because I showed her that we cared about them as people and not just as the almighty assets under management or the almighty, will file or whatever, the tax return. And we won their business. So that's the secret sauce. That's the secret to what clients really care most about. It's how to raise their families in an atmosphere of wealth and still have them grow up to be productive members of society and not the proverbial trust fund babies. And today we're going to talk about some specific techniques, some concepts you can take back to your desks and make a difference right away on how you attract and serve your clients. Every time there's a code, sorry. Okay. Sorry, folks, I don't know what's going on. There we go. Some people call these the soft issues, but I think they're really hard. So I actually think they're the hardest issues of all. So that's why I call this talk a hard look at the soft issues. So let's get right into the so-called soft issue skill set, how to speak with your client families about their generational wealth. And first, I want to start with the question I hear the absolute most from my wealthy clients. How much do I give my kids and when? And how much do I tell them and when? How old should my child be before they have access to significant sums of money? My favorite quote on the topic is from the so-called Oracle of Omaha, Warren Buffett, who said he wants his children to have enough that they can do anything, but not so much that they can do nothing. And a lot of families feel exactly that way. The corollary to that, of course, is how do I prevent entitlements? The knock on millennials these days is that they live in a world where Facebook was worth $1 bazillion in 5 minutes, and they think that's how it's done, and that they're not prepared to roll up their sleeves and put in the hard work. But I've talked to millennials and the X's and the Y's and the Z's and the alphas and alphabet soup. And that's not how they feel. They're actually willing to put in the hard work. They just believe that they don't have a chance in today's economy to create the wealth that their parents or grandparents did. And they're very frustrated about that. So, what I tell parents all the time and what you can tell your clients is that there is no one magic age. Parents know their children. Some kids handle money well, some don't. You know your grandchildren. Your clients know their grandchildren. Some will handle money well, some don't. But either way, tell your clients to plan for distributions for after their children have worked a few years. Nothing is more sobering than a pay stub. In this case, withholding taxes are your client's friend. I don't know about you, but remember that sticker shock the first time you saw how much salary goes for all those taxes that come out of a paycheck? I certainly remember my first paycheck. I worked at one of those fast food joints when I was a teenager. And let's say my first paycheck, I was expecting $10 and I only got $6. And I went to my boss and I said, hey, wait a minute, where's my other $4? And it's a great way for your clients' children to learn about withholding taxes, to learn how hard the people who one day are going to be working for them or have to work in order to pay their monthly nut. It is proven that people who have worked are more likely to take better care of even inherited wealth than people who have never worked. And many of my clients, I once facilitated a conversation where I gathered a number of women who were ultra high net worth in a room on first name basis only. And I asked one woman who has a very famous last name, whose her last name is seen on every grocery shelf in the country. And she said that she insisted that her kids have summer jobs and even after school jobs. And and that's what she attributed to her success in teaching her kids the value of hard work. And again, if your clients are super wealthy, or even if they're merely, what do they call it, mass affluent, their kids are still going to have people working for them, whether it's the housekeeper or it's the barista at Starbucks who makes their coffee every morning. But the sense of empathy for people who are working hourly jobs and have to pay their monthly nut is a really valuable lesson for your kids, your clients' kids to be taught by having those after school jobs and summer jobs. I will share with you that many clients, many people, after I've given this speech in the past, people have come up to me all the time to tell me, out of everything I said, and as I said, that hopefully this talk will be chock full of tips and techniques for you. People come up to me and say this was the thing that resonated the most for them, that their jobs during law school or their kids' summer jobs were the thing that really taught them the lasting values. So I share this with you to share it with your clients. Why is this not advancing? There we go. So some people say to me, that's all well and good for clients with teenage children or even college age children. But how do I guide my clients with small children? How young is too young to begin teaching family values to even little kids? And the short answer is that it's almost never too young to start. Even the youngest of your clients' children can begin to understand basic concepts like empathy and responsibility to others and the beginnings of a sense of community. And as those of you who have kids probably remember, they all sit in their high chair and what do? They throw their food on the floor and then they watch it hit the floor. And that's how they learn about gravity. But as soon as they're out of that high chair, it's not too soon to teach them that as a member of this family, they're expected to clean up after themselves to the best of their ability. And that means, number one, not throwing food on the floor for someone else to clean up. And when they're done eating, bringing their little dish and spoon over to the sink, because that's what we do as a member of our family. And we're all part of a community. And so we expect you to act like a member of the community and not expect other people to be cleaning up for you. I will share with you another example that one of my clients mentioned to me, and it really resonated with me. She was an inheritor of wealth. Her grandparents had created, I don't know, a widget or something, and she had a trust that was worth many, many millions of dollars. And she had really little children, and she told me that she used that nursery rhyme of the golden goose who laid the golden egg to teach her kids that this inheritance from her grandparents was this golden egg that it was her job to take care of and to nurture and to grow and not bust it open, but to steward it for future generations. And sure, sometimes we're going to take some coins out to support our lifestyle, but let's leave the egg in itself. I'm sorry, leave the egg itself intact to last and grow into the future. And that is something that your clients can start teaching with even their littlest kids, is that notion of, yes, we are stewards of wealth. We are here to enjoy it and to live good lives out of it, but also to steward it for the future and for the future generations of our family. What about the notion of your clients giving their kids an allowance? Is that helpful or harmful? What do you think? I think that allowances can be a really useful technique for your clients to use with their kids or even their grandkids, because it teaches many valuable lessons. It teaches budgeting. It teaches the difference between wants and needs. It teaches the difference between instant gratification and delayed gratification. And it can even teach social responsibility. But first, some rules of thumb. My rule of thumb with allowances is, number one, stick to a regular schedule. Don't just do the allowance when you remember, but if you're going to do it every Friday at dinner time, then do it every Friday at dinner time. And don't, oh, I forgot last week, so here's twice as much. Or, oh gosh, I forgot all month, so here's somebody actually said they gave their kid a check for their allowance, and obviously little kids don't understand what checks are. So stick to a regular schedule is number one. Number two, and this may be a little bit controversial, but it's something I truly believe in, is that an allowance should not be a reward for doing chores. Chores are expected as a member of this family, whether the chore is making your bed in the morning or cleaning up after dinner or taking out the garbage or whatever it is. Everyone in our family has a responsibility. Maybe in our family, dad goes to work every day and mom is the homemaker, or maybe mom runs the family foundation, or maybe mom is the breadwinner and dad is Mr. Mom. Whatever it is, but we all have responsibilities here, and you as the children also have responsibilities. In addition to that, I think that an allowance is a great way to teach kids about the difference between wants and needs. So your clients can say to their children that we as your parents will take care of your needs. We will put a roof over your head. We will clothe you. We will feed you. We will make sure that you are properly educated. Those are needs. The wants are, you don't need a new iPhone. You don't need that new video game. When your client's child turns 16, they don't need a new car. Those are wants, not needs. And the allowance is for the extra incidentals. So if they want that new video game or that new app on their phone, that's what the allowance is for. But that's the wants. The needs, as I said, the clothing, the food, the shelter, those are basic needs. And the other beautiful thing about allowances is it's a great way to teach budgeting. So you can't spend more than you have. And I'm sure that many of you have heard of the concept of the three-jar theory of allowances. So if you haven't, there's three jars, and you encourage your kids to divide up their allowance among all three jars equally. So the first jar is the spend jar. That's, of course, the instant gratification. That's where they go out and buy themselves a piece of candy, or they go out and, they order a new app for their phone or whatever that happens to be. The second jar is the save jar. That's the delayed gratification, right? So if that video game costs more than this week's allowance will buy, then you save it up for a couple of weeks and then you'll have enough at some point. And that's the concept of delayed gratification, which is a really important thing for your clients' children to understand. And then, of course, we're all here because of the third jar, which is the give jar. And that's the teaching responsibility to others. And what I like to do with families that prioritize that give jar is two suggestions. Suggestion number one is that the parent consider matching whatever the child puts into that give jar. So it should be, if let's say they're getting, I don't know, $3 and they put one in each jar, the parent right away matches the amount that the child puts in the give jar. So now there's $2 instead of $1 in that give jar. And so I had a business friend say to me a few years ago, I do that with my child, but she's only 6. So we give her 6 quarters a week because, again, she's only 6. And we encourage her to put 2 quarters in each jar. And so I suggested to her, why don't you think about matching the amount that your child goes in the give jar? And she said, well, we do, but we don't do it there. We, at the end of the month, we write a check to a charity. And I said, but your daughter's 6. She doesn't understand the concept of a check. I said, here's what you should do. Make all 3 jars clear. So she can see how many quarters are in each jar. And then every time she puts her 2 little quarters in that give jar, you have 2 quarters handy and put them right in the give jar as well. So she will see that give jar growing exponentially faster than the other 2 jars. And then give her the agency to actually decide when the jar gets full where that give jar goes, who should receive it, whether it's the hungry person sitting on the corner, or it's their school or PTA or whatever it happens to be, or their hospital. It give them the agency to actually decide where their allowance goes, and it gets them engaged in the process. And you can coach your clients to suggest to their child each week, you should start thinking about when this give jar gets full, where we want it to go to. And that's a really, really powerful lesson for even littlest kids. So the lesson here is that you have to coach your clients to be strategic about teaching their children and grandchildren the family's values, culture, and the sense of responsibility that accompanies their privilege. And that's a way that you can add enormous value to your client relationship. And that's my refrain throughout this talk today, is how do you set yourself above your competition to demonstrate to your clients that you care about them as families, that you care about the things that are keeping them up at night. And let's face it, what's keeping them up at night, unless there's a particularly volatile day in the market, is not their investment performance. And what's keeping them up at night is probably not their estate planning, unless their golf buddy at the country club just had a heart attack. And what's probably not keeping them up at night is their taxes, unless they just got a letter from Uncle Sam. What's keeping them up at night, again, is the age-old questions: how do I raise my family in an atmosphere of wealth and still have them turn out to be productive members of society? So I have 3 keys to raising children in an atmosphere of wealth that you can share with your clients. Number 1, we've already talked about, which is starting while young. And as I said, it's almost never too young to start. The concept of getting started is as little as young as bring your little dish and spoon over to the sink when you're done eating, or the golden goose with the golden egg. As they get older, get the teenagers to have after school jobs or summer jobs as a way of learning empathy and responsibility. And then as they get older, get them involved either in the family office, if there is one, in the family business, if there is one, but encouraging them to pursue careers that they are passionate about. So that's key number 1, is start while young. Key number 2 is for your clients to model the behavior that they want their children and grandchildren to emulate. Because as we all know, kids pay more attention to what you do than they ever will to what you say. So make sure you model the behavior and make sure your clients model the behavior that they want their children and grandchildren to emulate. And my third key is to find teachable moments. And the joke there, or the trick there, is that the teachable moments often happen at the least opportune times. Those teachable moments are going to be when your client is driving carpool and the kids are in the back and talking, or it might be, it's a proverbial story, but in this case, it actually happened to be true. Back in the day when you used to stand in line at the bank, so mom and little Johnny are standing in line at the bank, and little Johnny reaches over and grabs mommy's sleeve and says, "Mommy, are we rich?" Now, this happened in a small town, and everyone in town knew that they were, in fact, a wealthy family. And I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember that old E.F. Hutton commercial where everybody stopped and listened. Well, everybody in the bank stopped and listened. And what I will tell you to coach your clients is not to fudge an answer to an uncomfortable question like that. What's a fudge? A fudge is, yes, honey, we're rich because we have our health. Or, yes, honey, we're rich because mommy and daddy love each other and we didn't get divorced like so many of your schoolmates. Or something along those lines. That's a fudge. An appropriate answer that is not a fudge is, I will answer this question when we get home. There are some things that are not secrets, but they are private. And this is one of those things that we don't talk about in public. But if you do that, or if your client does that, make sure that when they get home, they actually do answer that question and actually answer the question asked. And that's a hard one for families. So there's that other proverbial story where little Jimmy comes home and says to his parents, "Where do I come from?" And the parents look at each other and think, uh-oh, it's time to have that birds and bees talk. And so they prepare and they plan and they read up on the appropriate way to answer it and all of that. And so finally they go through the whole birds and bees lesson with little Jimmy. And little Jimmy sits there and thinks a little bit and says, "Wow, that's interesting because my schoolmate at school, Sally, tells me she's from Cleveland, and I was wondering where we come from." So, yes, it's a joke, but the point is answer the question asked and don't think 2 steps ahead, but also don't fudge. So those are my 3 keys. My next thing is family governance and family meetings, how to help your family define their family's values, culture, and legacy. How do you have these conversations with your clients that may be a little bit uncomfortable for you, but will add enormous value to client relationship. So just as an exercise, think about your own family legacy. Think about the stories that you grew up with when you were little, the stories that your parents told you. I don't know, make this up. Your grandparents came over on a boat and they started a little corner store, and one thing led to another and they got very successful, and now it's a bazillion-dollar business. Or it could be where, we were born in Syracuse and we've always been here, but my grandparents' generation were blue collar workers and we're privileged enough to be white collar workers now. Whatever your family story is, chances are you know your family story, but it wasn't presented to you as a consistent, cohesive story that can be told and retold to your children and your own grandchildren. So when I think about this, I like to think about it in the traditional journalism approach of who, what, when, where, why, and how. And to me, it's just a powerful way to do that. So let's start with the why. Why is it so important to have these conversations with your clients? Well, it's often not comfortable to discuss, as we know, but your clients' children know more than your clients realize. And I'm sure many of you have heard of the expression shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. That's really why it's so important to have these conversations. And even though in the ultra high net worth community, some people think that the shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves concept has been debunked, ultimately this is what clients hear and this is what clients are concerned about, even if it's no longer technically correct. And for those of you who don't know, the concept is that G1, the wealth creator generation, has rolled up their shirt sleeves and worked hard in order to create the wealth that they have. G2, their children, has grown up sitting at the dinner table, hearing their parents talk about the business, watching their parents work hard to create the wealth that they did. And they understand the values of discipline and sacrifice and hard work that went into creating that wealth. But they're also starting to spend some money. And by the time it gets to G3, the grandchildren of the wealth creators, now between more mouths to feed, because if mom and dad have 2 kids and each of them has 2 kids, now you've just got more mouths to feed. So you've got dilution. In addition to that, you've got more free spending because the grandchildren generation wasn't brought up with the values of sacrifice and hard work and watching their elders work hard in order to create that wealth. So very often, G3 is back in shirt sleeves again, working really hard to create their own wealth. And so that's the why of all of this, is why to have these conversations, even though they might be uncomfortable, even though they might be challenging. So now let's turn to the what. What is a family legacy? So to me, the family legacy is the family stories. It's the family history. It's how the family's wealth was created. What it's not is the legal entities. So it's not the will, it's not the trusts, it's not the charitable foundation, it's not your donor advised fund or your fund at the Central New York Community Foundation. Those are the entities that memorialize the legacy plan. But the legacy plan itself is the stories, it's the pictures, it's the lore from generation to generation about who the people that came before you were and what they stood for and what our family stands for and what does it mean to be a member of our family. That's the what. Those are the really, really important lessons. What about the how? So very often at traditional family meetings in the ultra high net worth space, the how involves a family meeting where there may or may not be a professional facilitator, or it might be you as the professional, the trusted advisor, who's the professional facilitator to ease those difficult conversations across the generation. The family constitution, the family mission statement, the family bylaws, the family distribution policy, whatever it happens to be, those are part of the how. But the real lesson there is, let's say you work with your client family to create a family constitution with them. Even though that's technically the deliverable, the secret is that the real deliverable is the process itself. The real deliverable is getting the family members to talk about the stuff that they've never really talked about before. I actually just facilitated a family meeting yesterday where these folks talked about stuff they had never talked to each other about in their whole lives. The mother said to her daughter, "You know, I feel like I'm walking a tightrope when I talk to you, and I have to be so careful what I say." And the daughter, and she started crying. And the daughter said, "You know, I feel that, Mom, and I would really rather that you tell me the truth, even if I may not like it. I would really rather that we have a more open and honest relationship." They had never had this conversation in their lives together. So, and the daughter's in her mid 40s. So it can be really powerful if you encourage your families, your client families, to have these difficult conversations. And if you're comfortable facilitating them, then great, because you are their trusted advisor. Hopefully, you are their first phone call, and demonstrating to them that you care about them in this way is so amazingly powerful. If it is not something that you're comfortable with, then bring in a professional facilitator, whether it's me or someone like me. There are plenty of us out there who can help your client families have these difficult conversations. In addition to family meetings and family constitutions and family mission statements, sometimes, particularly with older wealth creators who maybe are nearer the day that they take their final breath, we've done video interviews of senior family members so that they can tell their story in their own words. And particularly that World War II generation, they have stories to tell that their grandchildren and great grandchildren need to hear. And feel free to reach out to me. I don't do it myself, but I know a ton of people who do these video interviews, or honestly, your clients can just do it right on their own iPhone. It is a great thing. There are also people who do interviews and will create a coffee table book about the family story. There are many, many tools that are part of the how of helping your clients explore what their family legacy means. And then, of course, philanthropy can be used as a teaching tool and an expression of the family's values. And we'll talk more about philanthropy in a few minutes. But now I wanted to turn to the who of family meetings. And this is actually a controversial one. And people say to me often that, well, yes, mom and dad should, of course, be part of the family meeting, and our kids should be part of the family meeting, but not necessarily the spouses of my kids. You know, sometimes they call these in-laws the outlaws. And what I caution my clients, and you can caution your clients, is that these outlaws, the so-called outlaws who are the spouses of your children, are not only the spouses of your children who maybe you think are waiting to get their grubby little hands on the family's assets, but they are the parents of your grandchildren. So your clients, if they exclude them from the discussions about who are we as a family and what do we stand for as a family, they're doing that at their own peril, because what lessons do you want translated to your grandchildren, and what lessons do your clients want translated to their own grandchildren is these very notions of culture and legacy and values of whether it's hard work or sacrifice or giving to others or lifting up people who are less well off than we. These are very challenging issues, and these are very important pieces of your client's family legacy and culture. So if they exclude the parents of their grandchildren from those conversations, how do they expect those values to be passed on? And how do they expect their in-laws to be engaged in the family's identity and the family's culture? So I say absolutely invite the outlaws, invite the children of your clients' children. I actually just gave this talk a week or two ago, and someone came up to me afterwards, and I kid you not, he said that in his family, his wife was the inheritor, and his wife's parents were the wealth creators. And they didn't call the spouses of their children the outlaws, they called them HAs. And what does HA stand for? Forgive me, it stands for horses, horse. And so the spouses of their kids were the HAs, and they just went through life knowing that they were always thought of in that family as the HAs, and that just cracked me up because what a message they're sending to people who marry into their family. We don't think you have value. We don't think your disparate background has value. We don't count what you have to say. And think about the message that that sends to those people. So by all means, invite them in. And sure, if there's a family business and maybe the outlaws are not involved in the family business, then maybe they don't need to be part of those business conversations. But you bet you want them involved when the issue has to do with the family values, the family culture, the family legacy. Those are the most important issues of all. And the same thing with the grandchildren. Invite them in, even if, not if they're super little where they're going to be disruptive, but as soon as they're old enough to actually and mature enough to actually have a seat at the table, then sure, by all means, invite them into the meetings, even if they don't necessarily yet have a vote because they still have a voice and they still have points of view. So I do think even if you form for your clients a junior advisory council where they don't get a formal vote at the family meeting, but they have an advisory vote, I think it's a really powerful tool to develop maturity in your clients' grandchildren, to give them that seat at the table. Again, give them that voice, even if they don't have a vote, and certainly even if they don't yet have a veto, but at the very least, give them that seat at the table. So the next question is the when of family meetings. And again, partly it's about modeling the behavior that your clients want their children and grandchildren to emulate and to create age appropriate teachable moments, no matter how young their children or grandchildren are. But my view on the when of things is the best time to start is yesterday. You can't start yesterday, so start today. And as Eleanor Roosevelt said, character building begins in our infancy and continues until death. So that's the who, what, when, where, and why, and how of family meetings. Next, we move to the topic of communication. And we all know the 3 rules of real estate, right? Location, location, location. Well, the 3 rules of good family governance are communication, communication, communication. And my favorite quote on the topic of communication comes from George Bernard Shaw, the famous Irish playwright who famously wrote Pygmalion, which became My Fair Lady, among other things. And I love this quote. He said, "The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place." I think that's so important. I'm going to repeat it. The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. The reason I love this quote is because so often we think we have communicated so much more than we actually have. And other times we've communicated so much less than we think we have. You will be doing a tremendous service to your clients by encouraging them to have these important financial preparedness conversations with their kids, or facilitating those conversations yourself, or bringing in a third party to add value to your client family. And it's hard. I get it. It's uncomfortable. It's scary for your clients to have that money talk with their clients. I often say that the money talk is even scarier for parents than the dreaded birds and bees talk. But parents who say to me that their children have no idea that their family is wealthy, they're just fooling themselves because the money is the elephant in the room. A few years ago, I sat in the library of a potential new client's home. This was easily a $25 million home, probably more. And he was explaining to me how his kids had no idea that his family was wealthy. And I just sat there and held out my hands and said, "Really?" And he smiled and he said, "Well, yeah, it's a nice house, but I'll tell you, it's the smallest house on the block." And I said, "Well, that may be, but it's a really nice block. And your son is 17 and he's going off to college next year. And while it is possible that his college roommate may also come from a house on this block or one like it, it is also equally possible that your son's college roommate may be a scholarship student who comes from much more modest circumstances. And you are doing your son a disservice by not equipping him to have these conversations and to be more self-aware of who he's going to encounter in life and more aware of the privilege that he has. Because after all, there's this wonderful thing out there called the internet. Maybe you've heard of it. Well, kids Google their parents. They Zillow their house to see what it's worth. They see how your clients live. They see how your clients travel. Kids at school talk. And of course, at Thanksgiving dinner, when the parents are all sitting and chatting over coffee and dessert, and the kids all go upstairs talking with their cousins, if your brother-in-law has told his kids about your family's wealth, but you haven't told your kids, guess what? Now your kids know. I actually had a client not too long ago who told me that her teenage daughter Zillowed their house to see what it was worth. Sort of a uh-oh gulp moment. But then and the daughter came to talk to her about it. But the funny thing was that the daughter also Zillowed her best friend's house and found out that her friend's house was even more valuable than theirs was. So, talk about a teachable moment. This is why you can add so much value to your client relationships by preparing your clients ahead of time and demonstrating to them that you're already thinking ahead about the difficult conversations that lie ahead for them. So, I'd like to tell you a little story. Everybody always leans in with those magic words, story time or once upon a time, but this one's actually a true story. So, there were two sisters. Um, Jenny is the one on the left and Sally's the one on the right. And you can see that, and this is a real picture, by the way, that these two sisters were super close. They were best friends. They were soulmates. And what happened as they got older was that Jenny, the one on the left, became financially successful. She married someone even more financially successful. She had two kids. She had a good life. But Sally, sadly, the one on the right, was afflicted with lifelong illnesses and became just very sad and very bitter and very sour. And she disengaged from her sister and she had a sad, lonely life. And the parents, recognizing that in their estate plan, left everything to Sally because they felt that Jenny didn't need it, but Sally certainly needed it. And so they left everything to Sally. But what they did wrong was they didn't sit both girls down, and especially didn't sit Jenny down and explain to her what their motive was. And so when mom and dad died, even though Jenny instinctively understood that her sister needed the money, she felt like my parents didn't love me. My parents didn't care enough about me. My parents loved my sister better. And my parents didn't even give me the opportunity to hear it in their own words or give me the opportunity to select some sentimental tangibles that really would have reminded me of my parents. And she felt angry and bitter and resentful of her sister. And in fact, the two sisters never spoke again. But what makes the story even worse is that a year or so later, Sally um, succumbed to her lifelong illnesses and she too passed away. But because of the rift between the two sisters, instead of leaving it to her sister or even her sister's children, she left it to a distant cousin. So now, poor Jenny is left with dealing with not only the loss of her parents, the loss of her sister, who she was so close with in her youth, but also the notion that everything her parents had worked for and scrimped and saved and worked so hard for now left the family and went to this distant cousin instead of to herself or to her own children. And so she was left feeling all of these conflicted emotions, and she was just miserable. And that is why it is so important to have these family conversations with your clients, even when it is so difficult, because the lack of having those conversations is what is going to hurt your clients' families way more than the temporary discomfort of, yeah, let's communicate about this stuff that it's hard, it's icky, it's uncomfortable, let's not do it, let's put it off to another day. But like that story I told you about the family meeting I did yesterday, where the mom was crying when she told her daughter, I feel like I'm walking on eggshells around you because you're likely to get angry with me at a moment's notice. And she started crying. And the daughter said, but mom, I'd really much rather that you be honest with me. Your clients' kids want to hear the truth. And so you will be doing an enormous service to your clients by encouraging this culture of communication. But now I'd like to move on to a different kind of communication. And that is the notion of prenuptial agreements. And look, you're all estate planners, whether you're the lawyers, the CPAs, the trust officers, the insurance folks. You're all dealing in one way or another with the concept of estate planning and the concept of, should I coach my clients to enter into a prenuptial agreement with their intended? And it is difficult to have those money conversations, particularly where there's inequality in the economics as between the two people. And of course, the risk is that your child's fiance or your client's child's fiance is going to think that that their in-laws don't trust them. But remember that these people are going to be the parents of your client's grandchildren. And the one thing we try to avoid is a situation which is a real life story, not this couple, obviously, but a 65-year-old couple after 42 years of marriage. Again, obviously not these folks, it's just an illustration, where they sat in the chair in my office back when I was an estate planner, and the wife turned to the husband and said, your parents never trusted me because 42 years ago, they made me sign that stinking prenup, and I've never forgotten. I've never forgiven. And so the key is how do we talk to our clients to coach them to talk to their kids about prenups without causing World War III. And then obviously there's all the other issues with prenups that especially the lawyers among you know about. So you're all planners. There's got to be full financial disclosure, probably including expectancies, if they're a trust beneficiary, or potential inheritance within reason. We all know the tips. There's got to be separate counsel. Your client shouldn't pay for the separate counsel, full disclosure. But my rules of thumb are that the prenups should be completely negotiated and inked before the invitations go out. What you don't want to have is the so-called Barry Bonds story, where in the limo on the way to the wedding, he handed her a prenup and a pen and said, sign it or the wedding's off. And obviously, again, the lawyers among you know that can be set aside for duress and undue influence, and nobody wants that. So have that all negotiated long before the invitations go out. And ideally, coach your clients to make their expectations about a prenup clear before they even start dating. So if their kids are, tweens, tell them, it doesn't matter who you marry. If you marry someone vastly wealthier than us or vastly less wealthy than us, it's part of our family culture is that we expect you to enter into a prenup with whoever you marry. And, obviously not on the first date, but as the kids start getting serious, you can encourage them to start having those conversations with the person even before they're engaged, that this is something that long before I ever met you, years before I ever met you, I knew that my parents were going to make me do this. So one tip that I've used with families, and I think is a really interesting one, is if your clients have multiple kids, encourage the kids to enter into a pact amongst themselves that no matter who we marry, we are going to, as responsible stewards of our wealth, we are going to expect each other to have a prenup. And that way you completely avoid your parents never trusted me, because it's not personal to them. Or let's say your clients have 3 kids, all 3 kids are going to have prenups because they made a pact amongst themselves that they were going to do this as responsible stewards of their family's wealth. And I think that's a really interesting approach to avoiding the dreaded your mother never liked me because she made me do that prenup. So the other thing is to encourage your clients to consider being willing and even eager to give something up. And I saw one prenup a long time ago that I thought was really interesting. It gave, so in this case, the wife, or the wife to be, I suppose, was the wealthier of the two. And her husband to be came from much more modest circumstances. And in the prenup, the parents of the bride gave a monthly allowance, I hate to call it an allowance, a monthly check, spending money, mad money, to the son-in-law. And the sneaky part about that was every single month that he cashed the check, he was reaffirming the prenuptial agreement. So later, and in this case, the marriage did fail. Later, he tried to claim that he wasn't bound by the prenuptial agreement. And the court said, well, you reaffirmed that prenup every single month when you cash those checks, and the prenup held up. So yeah, think outside the box. And it is a sneaky but effective way to make sure that the prenup stands up in court. Other thoughts, and you may know about this already, but nowadays, very often there are friends that are specially ordained just for the wedding. And just make sure that not only are they ordained, but it's valid in their county, because if they're not legally married, the prenup may not be enforceable. So that's kind of a tricky one that a lot of people don't necessarily think about on prenups. But again, my main point here is to encourage your clients to have the discussion about their expectations well before their kids are dating age. So now let's talk about family philanthropy, because at the end of the day, that's really why we're all here. So I encourage my clients, and you can encourage your clients, to think about their giving in strategic terms. What are they trying to accomplish? Are they trying to feed the hungry? Are they trying to find cures for diseases? Are they trying to fund the education or fund the arts, or all of these? And encourage your clients to explore what matters most to them and to help them find the best way that is tax efficient, financially satisfying, and emotionally satisfying to address. First, let's start with what are we solving for? And then you can help them, as their trusted advisors, solve for the smartest way to do that. And many of you probably think about the Family Foundation as a great way to introduce not only the importance of philanthropy, but to teach the kids the fundamentals of asset allocation, wealth management, and how to manage their wealth managers. So I'm going to show you my favorite quote about philanthropy, and I'll let you scratch your heads for a few minutes while I talk about philanthropy and why family foundations may not necessarily be the be all and end all. And that quote, and a former colleague said this, a family foundation is like a holiday puppy. So I'm going to let you think about that for a little bit. And now I just want to talk about family foundations for a little bit because there are so many landmines with family foundations. Who do you put on the board? Do you put the next generation on the board? So many of the questions we talked about earlier with family meetings. Do you include the next generation? Do you include the in-laws slash outlaws? How do we educate the people on the board about what our foundation stands for, what our family culture is? My big problem with family foundations is that they force the families to act together. In a former life, I used to run a donor advised fund, and we were routinely asked to break up clients' family foundations because, I don't know, one branch wanted to save the whales, another branch wanted to support education, another wanted to fund medical research. And yes, it's true, you can use family foundations for a lot of good things, but you can also use community foundations for them. So, for example, philanthropic vehicles are great for helping a family engage and explore their family values. Explore the senior generation's values, the junior generation's values, the values held by the family as a whole. And you can then use your client's fund at the community foundation as an expression of those values. Same thing with membership. So with a family foundation, maybe you have a board. With a donor advised fund or a community foundation, you've got the recommenders who the grants recommenders who it can be the children, it can be the grandchildren, it can be the in-laws, and determine an age when each of the family members, children or grandchildren, are eligible for membership as either on the foundation board or preferably as grant recommenders on the donor advised fund or the community foundation. You can create an advisory board like we talked about with family meetings for those who are too young for full board membership to participate. And the variation is that they can be non-voting members or advisory council members. But what I love about using family philanthropy is as an educational tool to talk about what the family's values are. And not everyone comes in with the same experience level, especially the married in family members. Maybe they come from a family, unlike your clients, in terms of giving philosophies or in terms of economic parity. And so it's an opportunity to talk about grant recommendations and best practices and investment policies and those sorts of things. But even before that, one tool that I just love is using discretionary giving as a way to teach the younger generation of your client families, and you can do it with your own family, of teaching them a sense of responsibility. So let me give you an example. I worked with a client a number of years ago, and it was actually a hedge fund family, and they had one son who then was in middle school. And they said to me, we really want to start teaching our son our values about giving back to our community. And so how do we do this? And I said, well, your son's in middle school. He's old enough. Why don't you allocate to him a portion? Let's pick a number, $5,000, whatever it is. It could be $1,000, a portion of your family's giving that is entirely up to him to allocate, and give him the tools. And the folks at the Central New York Community Foundation can certainly give you lots of tools that you can share with your clients to share with their kids. So give them the tools to do the research and identify what they care about. And have them make a little presentation to their parents in the living room about how and why they chose the charity that they did. And have your clients say to their kids, as long as we're confident and comfortable that you did your homework, even if it's not a charity that we otherwise might have supported, if we're satisfied that it's coming from a good and honest place and that you really did your homework, then we'll write the check. And they loved that idea. And so they had their son do that. And I actually still get goosebumps when I tell this story. This young man made a little presentation to his parents. And he said, you know, I'm in middle school now. And every day when I walk to school, I walk past my old nursery school. And my old nursery school is attracts students from all over town, not just from our nice part of town, but also, you know, the proverbial other side of the tracks that wasn't so nice. And every day when I walk past my nursery school, I noticed that their playground is looking a little run down. And so I would like to use my donation to build a new playground at my own nursery school. And I'm actually smiling with this story because the reason I get goosebumps is because this young man, it was such a selfless thing to do. He had no potential benefit there. There was nothing in it for him. He just wanted to pay it forward and have those little kids have a nicer playground. And so the parents did that. And I think we ended up putting a little plaque on the slide, you know, courtesy of John Doe or whatever the little boy's name was. And he had the pleasure of walking past that playground and seeing these kids playing in a nicer playground. So it's a really powerful lesson. If philanthropy is part of your client's family culture, there are many, many ways to use philanthropy as a teaching tool and as a way um, to explore their culture and their values and paying it forward. But with the benefits of a philanthropic vehicle like a family foundation come many factors that clients either are concerned about or should be concerned about. And the first one is the all-important priority of privacy. As you all know, 990 PFs, which are the annual filing for family foundations, are publicly available right on GuideStar. And when I used to meet with a new prospect, what I would do is go into GuideStar, look up their last name, and if there was a family foundation, I would print out the 990 PF and plop. I would drop it right on the conference table and say, is this your foundation? Is this your home address? Is this your signature? Because as you know, even though the signature is supposed to be redacted, it isn't always. And those of you who prepare 990 PFs for your clients, please don't use their home address because now everyone and their brother has open access to who your clients are, where they live, where they donate, in what amounts, and it is private. So that is another reason to use the Central New York Community Foundation is privacy. And of course, you all know that a donation to a private foundation gets less favorable tax treatment than a donation to a private charity like the Community Foundation. And a private foundation also has minimum distribution requirements and lots of administrative costs. So that's why community foundations are so powerful. And I will share with you that in my own estate plan, I have left a significant bequest to my local community foundation because I believe so strongly in them. It's a way for your clients to invest directly in their community, to take advantage of your partnership with the Central New York Community Foundation to help your clients address the very causes they care most about in their own community, whether it's feeding the hungry or housing the homeless or building a hospital or addressing local educational needs. And the team at the Central New York Community Foundation has the depth of resources to help your clients focus on exactly the need they care most about addressing in their own backyard. So the moral of this story is, even if your clients think, wouldn't it be nice if after I'm gone, for my children and my grandchildren to get together over Thanksgiving dinner and talk about their values and philanthropic interests? Doesn't that sound like pie in the sky? That's not what's going to happen. In all likelihood, they're going to be at each other's throats. So my watchword is don't force families to act together. Okay, so the answer to the question, why is a family foundation like a holiday puppy? Because it sounds like a great idea in concept, but the daily care and feeding might be more than you bargained for. There we go. Okay, so now I turn to what I like to call the equal versus equitable debate. And my main point here is that fair doesn't always mean equal, and equal doesn't always mean equitable. What do I mean by that? So parents tend to give to their children based on needs. That's appropriate. So if your client has one child who goes to junior college and the other one goes to med school, they're going to have different needs and different, frankly, asset protection needs. One child maybe lives in central New York or in the Midwest, and the other one lives in New York City. They're going to have different financial needs. One child becomes a stay-at-home parent or a member of the clergy or an inner city school teacher or a nonprofit employee, and the other child is Taylor Swift. Now, if there are any eagle-eyed Swifties in the audience, you'll likely be thinking, but Susan, I know what Taylor Swift looks like. That's not Taylor Swift. And you'd be exactly right. I couldn't find a royal-free public domain image of Taylor Swift, and I didn't want to take a chance on getting sued using her likeness. But you get the idea. I don't think anyone would disagree that Taylor doesn't need help from her parents to pay her monthly rent. But some of your clients' kids might, or your clients' grandkids might, who have chosen less financially remunerative careers. They very well might. That stay-at-home mom, or the docent at the museum, or the kid who builds houses for Habitat, those are the ones who really are struggling to pay their rent and could use some help from mom and dad. And parents always struggle with the challenge of treating their children fairly, because what nobody wants to happen is the dreaded thing that all parents worry about. Mom loved you better, or dad loved you better. And every sibling has said this at least once. And so in most cases, it's probably fine to give your kids equally, unless, let's say, one is Taylor Swift or one is a Shohei Ohtani or somebody making an untold millions of dollars, and maybe their sibling is less so. And then of course you're going to treat them differently because number one, they've got asset protection differences and they've got different needs, and that's all fair and that's all fine. But consider this example. So you're all planners. You've seen or used charts like this every single day. So mom and dad have two kids, a brother and a sister. And the parents, as their planners, you create equal trusts for the kids. So the daughter has a trust and the son gets a trust. And that's entirely fair. But what happens at the next generation, where the daughter has one child and the son has three children? So does the client maybe say, I have four grandchildren, so each one gets a quarter of my assets, 25%, maybe? Or does your client say, no, that's not fair because, my daughter's child shouldn't be disadvantaged because her uncle was fruitful and multiplied and had three children. So maybe your client says, no, I don't want to give it 1/4 each. Instead, I have two branches of my family, and each branch gets half my assets. Is that right? Well, maybe. You all know the Latin. I'm not going to teach you about per stirpes and per capita. You understand that. But the point I'm trying to make is that there is no one right answer. And the only real right answer is to ask the question. So your clients can decide for themselves. And I guarantee that 9 out of 10 lawyers never discuss this with your clients. It's baked into your boilerplate in your documents. I've given this talk all over this country. And actually, I've only encountered one community in all those presentations where the estate planning lawyers actually came up to me afterwards, or raised their hands because I was in person, and came up to me and said, we always discuss per stirpes versus per capita with our clients. And I was shocked because it is the only time I've ever given this talk that has ever happened. So please, as a public service announcement, if you don't now, and it's just baked into your boilerplate for the lawyers out here, please do your clients a service and ask your clients which outcome feels more comfortable for them, because it might surprise you. And if you're not a lawyer, if you're an insurance person, if you're the accountant, if you're the trust officer, if you're the CPA, you have those conversations with your clients too, even if your client's lawyer isn't asking them, and actually chart it out and show them the difference. That in this case, in the per stirpes sense, it's going to be 25% each, but in the per capita sense, the daughter's child is going to receive 50%, and the son's 3 children are going to each receive 1/3 of 50% or 1/6. And does that feel fair to your clients? Every client's going to have a different point of view. I will tell you, in my own parents' estate, they handled it differently. My mother left it differently than my father did. So my father basically said 25% to each child, and my mother said, no, we are, we have 2 branches of our family. And so I want my daughter's child to get my daughter's 50%. And so they disagreed even between themselves, and the lawyer drafted it the way their clients wanted it. And so my daughter ended up with more than her cousins did from my mother's estate, but exactly the same amount as her cousins did from my father's estate. And there's nothing wrong with that, as long as, again, back to the issue of communication. So encourage your clients to, especially if they're doing something that they think their kids might feel after they're gone, parents loved you better than they loved me. Encourage your clients to have those difficult conversations now while they're alive, because as we all know, while the parents are alive, they're the referees and they keep the peace. And after the referees are gone, the peacekeeper is gone, and then all bets are off. So in their own voice, encourage your clients and offer to facilitate those meetings, or offer to bring in a facilitator to those meetings. But make sure those family conversations happen about why we did what we did, and give the kids and grandkids an opportunity to ask the questions now while they can, while the decision maker is still alive, so that they can hear in their own authentic voice why they chose to do what they did. And it's not always clear. So I'll give you an example. I worked with a family a few years ago, maybe 5 years ago, where I think the parents had maybe $40 million, and they had 2 children. The daughter was very financially successful. She worked for a wealth management firm. She was engaged to someone who was also financially successful, worked for a different wealth management firm. And they were financially very savvy and financially very comfortable with investment concepts and wealth management and all of that. And sadly, the son was in the midst of a really tragic substance addiction. And they had been working with the son and getting him in rehab programs and all this and that. But sadly, the son hadn't yet worked it out. And the parents said to me, so as I mentioned, I call myself a recovering trust and estates lawyer. So I no longer draft documents, but what some families do, and what this family did, was engage me to help them map out what the plan should look like. And the lawyers loved it because it saved them from having all of those soft conversations that they're not comfortable having. And it also freed them up to do what honestly is in the highest and best use of their time, which is the actual drafting. And so the family engaged me to help them think through their estate plan. And the first thing the parents said to me is, well, because our daughter is so financially savvy, and because our son is really in the grips of this awful addiction, we are going to leave our daughter's share outright and we're going to leave our son's share in trust for him. And then they said, and because our daughter is so financially savvy, we are going to make her the trustee of her brother's trust. And I said, that's not going to work for two reasons. Yes, on paper, it makes sense that you trust your daughter financially, you trust her financial judgment, and therefore you want to leave her share outright because she doesn't need it in a trust. And I fully understand why you want your son's share to go in a trust because frankly, if he has access to it outright, it's just going to go to feed his tragic addiction. But what message does that send to your son? And you are setting your children up for a sibling lifelong rivalry where the son will always resent his sister for having been treated differently than he was. So here's what you should do instead. Why don't you set up fully discretionary trusts for both each of the son and the daughter, separate trusts? And instead of putting your daughter in charge as trustee of your son's trust, because really all they really wanted was that the daughter be the investment manager, and they thought the only way they could do that was by making her trustee, I said, why don't you set up a directed trust where, or not even a directed trust, but why don't you set up a fully discretionary trust where name an independent trustee, whether it's a bank or a longtime trusted family friend, or your trusted advisor, your lawyer, your CPA, whatever. But name an independent trustee and direct or suggest in the document that they hire your daughter as the investment advisor, but not give her any fiduciary powers. So she's not controlling her brother's purse strings. And that was really the key, was not creating ahead of time a recipe for disaster, not creating ahead of time a situation where the son is always going to resent her sister, either because she got her money outright and he didn't, or because she controlled the purse strings for him. So now all she was going to be was the one who was making him money. She was going to be the one who was investing his assets right alongside how she invested her own assets for the future. And in that way, you're eliminating that source of friction that inevitably is going to come at some point in the future. And so, yes, talk to your clients about these sorts of issues, especially when circumstances dictate, as in this situation, that the kids did need to be treated differently because the son just couldn't have outright access to his funds. But in this way, we eliminated, as I said, that source of friction between him and his sister by actually treating them exactly the same way, that they both took their shares in fully discretionary trusts with an independent trustee who was left with the discretion to make distributions of income and principal in their sole discretion as the beneficiaries needed it. And if you are named as that independent trustee, you don't have to make distributions to the son with the substance abuse issue. You can make distributions for his benefit. So you can use trust funds to pay his rent. You can use trust funds to pay his monthly tab at the grocery store. And those sorts of things, to pay his gas and have him give you those receipts. And I've seen circumstances where that person, that beneficiary, actually stands at the gas station and gathers the receipts from the folks who charge their gas but don't necessarily take their receipt. And I've seen situations where, that addicted person will present a stack of receipts, like a minute apart, 1201, 1203, 1205, and present a stack of those receipts to the trustee and say, okay, reimburse me for all this gas. As trustee, it's your responsibility to be prudent and actually look at those things and not just add them up and say, okay, well, they're for gas, but actually to look at them and, to the extent possible, to pay the expenses directly to the vendors rather than putting cash directly in the pocket of that beneficiary who is, at this point, at least in time, not financially trustworthy. And so that is another tip for you if you have clients that are in that really unfortunate situation, but your client family says, you know, I really do want to find a way to be fair to both my kids and to treat them equally and equitably. And how do you do that? Because as I started, fair doesn't always mean equal, and equal doesn't always mean equitable. And it is between that and the per stirpes versus per capita conversation, those are the two important things from this equal versus equitable piece of this. I want to go back to that story of, remember the story of the two sisters, Jenny on the left and Selma on the right, and the unfortunate story about what happened. Well, I'll let you in on a little secret. So that sister on the left, Jenny, that was my mother. It's all a true story. And the one on the right was my aunt. And when it happened, it affected me very deeply. It obviously affected my family very deeply and caused my mother many years of resentment and anger and upset. And that's why I'm so passionate about family communication. And that's why I'm here speaking with you about it today. Actually, there was one time when I gave this talk and someone came up to me and said, you know, I could kind of see the family resemblance to you in Jenny. So I don't know. I'll leave that to you. But it is why I'm here talking to you about family communication today, because I saw the upset that it caused my family. I saw the anger in my mother when all of this happened and how she felt like her parents didn't trust her. Her parents didn't love her. And she never had that opportunity to even select, you know, Aunt Tilly's brooch, or, you know, I will share with you my most valued tangible is a cooking pot, a piece of cookware that my mother used to use to prepare our holiday meals. And it was her special pot. She only used it for the holidays. And when I use it today, I still channel standing by her side in our old kitchen at the counter, being her helpmate, and you know, and using that pot. And so today, when I use that piece of cookware to prepare my holiday meals for my own family, I do channel my mother, and I do remember the lessons she taught me and the guidance she gave me. And so um, the opportunity to use this story as a teaching tool with your own clients is a beautiful one, whether you share the exact story or not. It really doesn't matter. It's the message here that even sad stories can have positive outcomes. And my positive outcome is the privilege to share my mother's story with you, and hopefully send you back to your desks after this webinar, thinking about these things in a whole different way than perhaps you had been, with some tools and tips and techniques that'll get you started. Because at the end of the day, what you need to demonstrate to your clients is a lot more than just drafting that slat, or drafting that trust, or drafting that will, or um, or preparing that gift tax return, or selling them that great second to die life insurance policy. What you're trying to demonstrate to your clients, or what I hope you've taken out of what I've said today to help you demonstrate to your clients, is that you care about them as families and not just as another file on your desk, but you care about them as people and stories and families, and help them perpetuate their values to their future generation. And so, yes, I hope you start thinking about these things in a whole different way than perhaps you ever did before, with some of the tools and techniques that I've shared to help you get started. So before we get to Q&A, I want to leave you with this thought, that bequests are messages from those no longer living. So be sure your clients convey the message that they intend. And now I would like to start taking some questions. Hopefully you have you have typed some in the chat box, and if not, maybe you can do so now. No questions yet. While you are thinking about them and typing them into the chat, I will share with you the one jurisdiction where the lawyers actually raised their hands and said, no, we actually do talk about per capita versus per stirpes with our clients and keep them and leave the decision to them rather than our boilerplate, was in Birmingham, Alabama. Interestingly, that is the only place all across this great country where the lawyers actually ask their clients, or the only jurisdiction in my experience. And put in the chat if you have other, if maybe you do, because I'd love to be educated. But right now, it is Birmingham is the standout for me. I did have a question here. Any books you suggest clients might want to read on the topic? Absolutely. The Granddaddy book is written by Jay Hughes. It's called Keeping It in the Family. I have it on my bookshelf. Let me get that. It's a wonderful book, and I want to show it to you. Hold on. I hope you can see it. I'm holding it up. It's called Family Wealth, Keeping It in the Family, How Family Members and Their Advisors Preserve Human, Intellectual, and Financial Assets for Generations by James E. Hughes Jr. And he's also a retired lawyer who has dedicated his life and his life's work to helping families develop their human capital in their families. There are many, many wonderful books out there. If I had to recommend one, I would absolutely say Jay Hughes's book is number one. Dennis Jaffe just wrote a couple of years ago a wonderful book, keeping it with the grandchildren or preserving it for your grandchildren or something like that. Dennis Jaffe, Jaffe. And it's something I can't remember now the title of it. It's also on my bookshelf, but I'm not going to excuse myself again. But it's something about learn from your grandchildren or something like that. So those are two wonderful, wonderful books. If you want more, my contact info is on the screen. I've got a bookshelf full of books. There's a wonderful, another tiny, tiny book written by a business friend of mine, a brilliant woman named Barbara Hauser. And she wrote it a long time ago, and it was called Mommy, Are We Rich? And that's another one. And it's very small, it's very approachable. Highly, highly recommend. What is roughly the cost of hiring a family meeting facilitator? Oh, interesting question. Who pays the fees? The family, the advisor, or combination of both? And at what net worth does it make sense? 50 million, 100 million? Question. So at what net worth does it make sense to me? So I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not an asset manager. I'm not an asset allocator. I don't make money based upon AUMs. And so to me, I'm somewhat agnostic about a client's balance sheet as long as they have sufficient wealth that they're thinking about their legacy. And that sort of depends on geography. So I live in New York City, and in New York City, the standard of living is pretty expensive. And so $10 million, or let's just say $1 million, doesn't go very far in New York City. You can barely buy an apartment in New York for $1 million. But in central New York, it may be different, and the cost of living might be more modest than it is in New York City where I live. So to me, it's more about at what wealth level are they thinking beyond, do we have enough to live nicely for the rest of our lives? But rather, do we have enough that now we're thinking about our legacy, that now we're thinking about the generations who come after us? And that's really what I think about when I think about engaging with families. So for me, I would say my personal sweet spot If I did have a minimum, it would probably be 25 million. And I've worked with families in the billions, the multiple billions. And on average, I would say my sweet spot is probably 50 to 250 million, but different advisors and different facilitators may have different experience based upon their clients. So at what net worth does it make sense? At the level where they have enough that now they're thinking about the generations after them and how to set things up as more than just an estate plan, but actually communicating their values, culture, and legacy. In terms of the cost and who pays the fees, that varies. Often the wealth creator generation honestly pays the fees because that's the ones who control the purse strings. And it's good estate planning, frankly, to have the senior generation pay the fees because then there's less in the pot for to be taxed later. But not always. Sometimes the family business pays the fees. Sometimes the family office, if there is one, pays the fees. It is, it varies. You know, you've heard the snowflake idea of family offices that no two are alike. And if you've seen one family office, you've seen one family office. And so there is no general rule. And roughly the cost of hiring a facilitator really varies depending on the scope of the project. Some facilitators charge hourly. I personally, for those of you who do charge hourly, God bless you, but I hate to charge hourly because for me, I like to have the in-depth conversations with the families. And you can't do that if the clock is running because as you all know, those of you who bill hourly, it just everything gets short-circuited. They hesitate to pick up the phone to call you. They hesitate to email you because it's going to be another tenth of an hour on your billable hours. So pardon me, while some people do charge hourly or a retainer, I like to just do a flat fee, and which varies depending on the complexity of the matter. So I can't frankly give you a number, but it is it varies on complexity and and so many different factors. But very often, what advisors will say to me is, I'll subsidize to some extent bringing you in. And then if it turns into a full-fledged thing, then it'll be a client referral. But otherwise, you know, maybe we'll work something out. We'll do it under the umbrella of my organization. I don't know if other family business advisors operate the same way. I think everyone is bespoke. So I don't know if that's a good answer to your question, but that's the best answer I have. Are there any other questions?
I think Jan had her hand up. Jan, did you still have a question?
Hi, Susan. Jan Lane with the Central New York Community Foundation. Thank you so much for your talk and for being here today, sharing your insights. I think, you know, your approach to legacy planning is very much aligned with, you know, the way we approach these conversations at the Central New York Community Foundation. And I'm just wondering if you have any go-to resources, you know, in your toolkit for families who, you know, maybe are just interested in kind of reflecting on, you know, some of the questions and the values conversations themselves. I know you said that it's not likely that they're going to do that at the Thanksgiving dinner table, but for those who are curious to kind of attempt to sort of self-facilitate, right? Is there like a questions list or different tools or resources that you would recommend?
Yeah, what a great question. So families can absolutely get started on this even without the benefit of a facilitator. And it's great if they want to start having these conversations. There are many, many resources out there. I will tell you on my own website on WLALLC.com, I have a tab that is, so there's different tabs across the top, and one of them is publications. And every month I put out a monthly thought piece. These are not self-serving, they're not sales at all. They are educational in nature. And every month I put out a different thought piece on different topics of family legacy, and they can by all means take a look at those and I post them on LinkedIn. You can certainly subscribe to my LinkedIn if you'd like. I also have a YouTube channel, and every month I put out a 2 or 3 minute video on there, very short, very accessible. You can have them take a look at my YouTube channel as well, or you can as the advisors. There's lots of interesting information on there as well. I also recently just wrote an article in Trust and Estates Magazine's e-newsletter about the loss of privacy that accompanies family foundations and why families might consider using a community foundation or a donor advised fund as their philanthropic vehicle. So that's in the publications tab as well. So those are some resources that I make available directly. I'm not a big believer in checklists, honestly. I think that the families that we're talking about here deserve bespoke guidance and not the sort of checklists that some people use, like here, fill this out and then come back to me. So I am a big believer in being able to address each client family separately. And so, no, I'm not a big believer in checklists. Sorry about that. Are there
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? I don't see any in the chat. Is there anyone else who wanted to?
No, I don't see any questions, Susan. This has
Okay,
been.
so let me just do my call to action, as it were, and then I'll turn it back to you, Pragya. So my final thought is that, again, first of all, I want to thank Melanie and Pragya and the amazing team at the Central New York Community Foundation for inviting me, and that hopefully some of the things we talked about resonated with you today and got you thinking about these ideas in a new and different way. So now the ball is in your court. Now it's up to you to keep the momentum going. Now I want you to think about how you can implement even one of these tools. And I gave you a slew of different tools. So even one of these tools, tips, and techniques with even one of your client families in the next few days. You will earn their loyalty because you're showing them that you care about them as families and not just assets under management or a life insurance contract or a will engagement, but you care about them as people and not just the file on your desk. So that's my call to action. Your time is now. And I want to thank you all. And back to you, Pragya.
Thank you, Susan. This was such an important presentation. So many great messages, so many practices, and that we share here. We practice at the Community Foundation with our donors, whether they're lifetime fund holders, like donor advised fund holders that you referred to, and our we do a lot of legacy planning with Jan Lane. Focuses on, and just giving them the time to discuss their values, shared values with the younger generation, so they're in mutual understanding of what the older generation value emphasize in their values and legacy to carry on. So when they as a succession planning, when they are making the grants out of the fund that they have inherited from their parents and grandparents, not only they can carry forward the legacy and the values their parents cared about, but also their individual values as well. So we hold those meetings as well. Really, and donor advised fund holders is a great vehicle here to result in a legacy, an endowment fund to support the charities and causes individuals and families care about in our community. So thank you so much, and thank you for sharing all of those resources as well. So we are nearing 2 p.m. Thank you all for who attended and stayed on for the 2-hour seminar here. And like Susan said, you have her contact information. Feel free to contact her directly, or let us know, and we can talk to Susan and arrange if you want any other information. So just some logistics again, hopefully you've collected the mandatory CE codes and submit those in the next hour prior to 3 p.m. if possible. and then the evaluation form. We really want to know what you thought of this presentation, any improvements that we can make as we'll start planning for the next CE seminar in November, which is next week. So that would be great. And email me or Jan or Tom or any members of the development team here if you have any questions. And as always, thank you so much for your support, and hope you enjoyed the presentation and have a great day.